How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Buddy's House of Horror, and welcome to 10 horror films that I have not seen. Yes, a rare podcast talking about films that I need to check off of my list. 10 films that I haven't seen for one reason or another, even though I've been watching horror films for the majority of my life. And we're going to get right to the show, but before we do that, if you guys haven't already, please make sure you're subscribing to the show, whether it be on Google Podcasts, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the show. Make sure you're leaving me a 5-star rating and a review, subscribing, commenting, and spreading the good word about Buddy's House of Horror. Tell all of your horror friends out there to be checking out the premier horror podcast on the internet, Buddy's House of Horror podcast. So with that, we're going to be talking about the 10 horror films that I thought of tonight that I have not seen yet. And we're going to get right to it right here, right now. So now it's time to get spooky. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Buddy's House of Horror podcast, and welcome to Let's Record a Podcast While Buddy Waits for his Uber Eats order to get here. That is the goal for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. The goal is to record this podcast in the meantime whilst I am waiting for my delectable Indian food dinner to arrive right at my doorstep. It's been notorious for me. What I love to do after a long week of working hard is to give myself a delectable treat, especially if my wife is not home, especially if my wife is out of town. In this case, she is out of town, and I do what I normally do when she is out of town, is order Indian food. I think it's been determined that Indian food is my third favorite meal of all time. Number one, obviously, is a pizza. Pizza, my all-time goated favorite food. I like any style of pizza pretty much, but I love just your run-of-the-mill, mom and pop, good, home-style, local pizza. I love local pizza. Local pizza specifically is my favorite meal of all time. You've got to find a few shops around you that you like, and those gotta be your favorite to-go pizza spots. So that's what it is for me. 3 of my favorite pizza spots are in the Cleveland area. Second favorite meal, definitely sushi. Love all-you-can-eat sushi. I definitely go absolutely bonkers at an all-you-can-eat sushi restaurant. So that is my number 2 for sure. Number 3 has to be Indian food. I love it. There's just something so warm and comforting about having that nice bowl of curry, your naan bread, the good spice within you. It feels hot all the way down, keeps your stomach nice and warm throughout the rest of the night. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the night. I'm going to be enjoying my delectable Indian cuisine and watching a film. What film am I going to watch? I don't know yet. But that's what was sort of the inspiration for the video that I'm doing today. I'm going to be doing 10 horror films that I've never seen. We're going to talk about 10 horror films that you may as well take my horror card away from me, because I am an absolute poser for never seeing any of these films. And I just want to preface this and announce that this is not a top 10. These are just 10 horror films that I've ever seen. Obviously, I cannot, physically will not watch every single horror film that has ever been made. But these are just 10 that I just kind of looked online for a second and was like, wow, like I cannot believe that I haven't seen this yet. Some of them I want to see, some of them I don't necessarily have a huge interest in seeing, but it's just shocking that I haven't watched them yet in my 32 years of life and 20 plus-ish years of watching horror films, that I haven't checked out some of these films. So this is by no means a top 10. This is by no means the most famous films that I haven't seen or the most obscure horror films that I haven't seen. These are just 10 that came to me very quickly. I just jotted down 10. Obviously, there's a lot more than 10. This could have been a top 50, top 100, top 200 films in the horror genre that I haven't seen. But I wanted to stick with some that are somewhat mainstream. I wanted to stick with some that are a little bit more out there. Just kind of have like an eclectic little group of films that for some reason, one way or another, I haven't seen. Obviously, all of these are, I don't want to say classics, but all of these are films that are known. I didn't want to do anything super, super obscure. All of these are either films that have a reputation for being somewhat of a classic. Maybe they're done by a famous director. Maybe they have a famous actor within them. Maybe they're just a cult classic, something like that. But all of these films are known. All of these films are, I don't want to say public knowledge for every single horror fan, but if you're a horror fan, you've definitely heard of these films, if not seen these films. Nothing in this list is something that's going to be absolutely off the wall bonkers, like some obscure short film that a director made when he was overseas on a college trip and he shot it in the woods and blah, 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 like all this shit. Like, no, these are horror films that are pretty much easy to find. You can find information on them online. Like, these are horror films that for some reason, whether or not, whatever the case is, I haven't seen them. So we're going to start off the list with a film that I've been wanting to watch for an extraordinarily long time. Extraordinarily long time I've wanted to see this because I am a big fan of this director's work. And for some reason, this film has eluded me for years. Eluded me for years. When it comes to Italian horror, there are few as big as Dario Argento. And every single film that I've seen of his, I have liked. Every single film that I've watched, I want to preface this, every single film that I have watched from his, I have liked. I have not seen all of his films. I know he's got a few stinkers, especially later on in his career. But he started off his career rather strong. And one of the films from early on that I have not seen is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. It's one of Miles's favorite films. I think it's in like his top 10 favorite films of all time. Very highly regarded as an essential classic. But for whatever reason, haven't checked it out yet for one reason or another. Of course, this is from 1970, a decade of films that I am very, very attached to. I've gone on several different tangents over the years about 70s horror films and why I love them so much. And I feel like this film is going to fit right in with a lot of the things that I have sensibilities for, a lot of the things that I already like. 96 minutes, also solid-ass runtime for a film. All the screaming in the world won't help. An American writer living in Rome witnesses an attempted murder that is connected to an ongoing killing spree in the city and conducts his own investigation despite himself and his girlfriend being targeted by the killer. If you are to look at my friends on Letterboxd, you're not going to find a score that is below 3.5. Everyone that's seen this film sings its praises, and for one reason or another, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, and I want to see it. But there's just so many things to watch in your life, and it's been hard for me to sit down and watch this one with so many different options. On a night like tonight, it's easy for me to pop on a 70s horror film and just watch it. But a lot of times if I'm watching films with friends, watching films with my wife, watching films with family members, whatever it is, hey, let's pop on this horror film from 1970 that was made in Italy. Let's check it out. It's a little bit of a hard sell at times for some of the casual viewers, which I may be watching with. Not that any of my friends, family members are casual viewers, but I'm saying to just casually watch a film. This one might not be an easy choice to make. Much with to the same tune as the last one. The next one, rather. I keep saying last, and you're going to see why I keep saying last instead of next in a second. Because the next film on the list is another 70s film by one of the most famous horror directors of all time that I haven't seen for some reason. Probably, like, genuinely, I never really had an interest in seeing it. I still don't really have the biggest interest in seeing it, but The Last House on the Left has been, like, notorious for, like, eluding me for years. Obviously, if you know what goes on within the plot, who our central characters are, it's easy to know why I've kind of avoided it for so long. But I know at some point in my life, I'm going to need to check out The Last House on the Left. Of course, directed by Wes Craven, 1972. 72 is a great year for horror, same year as the Night Stalker made-for-TV film came out. It rests on 13 acres of earth over the very center of hell. On the eve of her 17th birthday, Mary and friend Phyllis set off from her family home to attend a rock concert in the city. Attempting to score some drugs on the way, the pair run afoul of a group of vicious crooks headed by the sadistic Krug. Basically, the plot of this movie is you're following a group of rapists. And what happens is it makes you think that these rapists are terrible, horrible people, obviously, which they are, because they do such heinous things. But then the film sort of has a twist where the rapists are then being attacked and tortured and stuff like that. So it kind of like plays with your sense of judgment, I guess, because yes, these are terrible people and they deserve bad things to happen to them, but it kind of like plays with your mental state a little bit, because then you're watching terrible things happening to terrible people, and how are you supposed to feel about that? This was by Wes Craven, as I said. Like, he was not a horror filmmaker at the time, and they basically just told him, like, come up with whatever horror story you want, and he came up with something so fucked up and mentally horrific that it stood the test of time, and obviously he is one of the greatest horror directors of all time for that reason. Even early on in his career, before we really knew what he was going to get into, he was already cranking out very complex and layered stories, which is what this is. But again, it's just not something that I was ever really interested in watching, and it still isn't really. I know one day I will. One day I'm going to have to watch it. But I don't know. It kind of like a modern equivalent of this. It's very similar, I guess, to Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects, where you watch the main characters go and do a bunch of terrible shit, then they get captured, and then they become sort of your protagonists of the film. So I could tell that was very much influenced by Last House on the Left. Obviously, the people in Last House on the Left, they're doing more heinous things. I mean, they're doing murder and rape and terrible, terrible, awful, awful things, which is why I don't even necessarily like talking about the film. So we're going to move on to another film by a very famous director. So I kind of had these... The way I was like compiling this list is I kind of did it by theme, right? So I started with a 70s film, moved into another 70s film, and that 70s film was directed by a very famous American director, and so is this next one. We're talking Prince of Darkness by John Carpenter from 1987. One of my favorite directors of all time. Again, I like the majority of the films that I have watched from John Carpenter. Halloween, obviously, my favorite film of all time. I love The Thing. I love They Live. I love The Fog. I love Christine. I even love fucking Cigarette Burns, that fucking 2000 whatever movie that I watched in college. There's just something about his films that I really, really like, and I've always wanted to see Prince of Darkness. For whatever reason, I have not seen Prince of Darkness, which is surprising because it's an 80s film, it's John Carpenter, it's Donald Pleasance. Like, how have I not watched this film yet? It is 102 minutes. It's about 12 minutes too long for my personal taste. Before man walked the earth, it slept for centuries. It is evil. It is real. It is awakening. A group of graduate students and scientists uncover an ancient canister in an abandoned church. But when they open it, they inadvertently unleash a strange liquid and an evil force on all of humanity. Again, it's a legendary film. Obviously, it's not as high tier as some of the other John Carpenter films that I've talked about, but it's still an essential for all John Carpenter fans. And I do want to watch it. I do own it. And I've wanted to watch it for a very long time, but for whatever reason, haven't gotten around to watching it. So take my horror card now. It's revoked until I officially see Prince of Darkness. And I don't have a ton to say about it because I don't really know what happens in the film. I mean, obviously, with all these films, I've never seen them. There's not a ton for me to talk about, which is why I thought this would be a nice little brisk episode. So, Prince of Darkness from the 80s, John Carpenter. Another film John Carpenter did from the 90s is Village of the Damned. And I could have put two John Carpenter films on the list, but I wanted to kind of stick it to one filmmaker per list. Another self-inflicted rule that I put on myself for this list was one per director. So Prince of Darkness took the John Carpenter card, but Village of the Damned is actually a remake. And I've never seen the original Village of the Damned. And it's something that I have been in love with the imagery that I've seen of it, of like the creepy kids, for a long time. But for some reason, haven't checked it out. This is from 1960. A great year for horror. Some of my favorite horror films from the 60s came out in 1960. We're talking City of the Dead. We're talking Psycho. We're talking Black Sunday. I have a feeling this one is going to fit right in with those other films. It was directed by a guy named Wolf Rilla, who I've never seen any of his films. He's directed 21 of them, but I've never seen any of them. So if I watch the original Village of the Damned and I like it, I'm going to have to check out some of this other dude's stuff, for real. What demonic forces lurk behind those eyes? In a small English village, everyone suddenly falls unconscious. When they awake, every woman of childbearing age is pregnant. The resulting children have the same strange blonde hair, eyes, and a strong connection to each other. I've been aware of the plot of this film. Obviously, I'm a fan of John Carpenter. He did remake this. So it's something very interesting that I want to check out. I mean, there's not a ton to really say about these films, as I said. These are 10 films I haven't seen. Some of them I want to see. Some of them I don't. Village of the Damned. Again, another one for the people that I know who have seen it. It's hard to find a score under 3. Hard to find a score under 3, 3.5 even. So obviously, highly regarded, obviously well known, not super obscure, probably one of the most obscure ones on this list, but, you know, not super obscure, still relatively well known. When you talk about horror, it doesn't get much more well known than Bela Lugosi. If you don't know his name, you know his film, Dracula, 1931. Probably one of the greatest horror performances, horror characters, horror personas, horror legacies of all time. He played Dracula only 2 times on film, but people think he played it billions of times. He's played other vampires on film. He's played people pretending to be vampires on film, but he's only played Dracula 2 times. But why do people have that sort of perception of him? Like, he played it on stage a billion times, we get that. But he did play several other vampires, as I mentioned. So he played Dracula-like characters in other films. In one of the films that I've been wanting to see for a long time, because Bela Lugosi is in it, but also because it's a remake of a lost film that I will never see. It's impossible for me to see. Of course, I could have just made this the top 10 lost films or put the actual film London After Midnight on this list, because I'm never going to be able to see it. I can't see it. No one can see it. It's a lost film. But the remake of the film Mark of the Vampire, also directed by Todd Browning, who did London After Midnight originally, is a film that I haven't seen, but I really want to. I own it on VHS. I haven't checked it out yet. That one might be a contender for tonight. If I'm home alone watching a film from 1935, that's the only time I'm going to watch it, is when I'm home alone, because it's hard for me to get people to watch a film from 1935 with me. Undead, yet living on the kisses of youth. Sir Boyleton, I don't know how to really say that, that's how I'm going to go with, Boyleton, A prominent Prague resident is discovered murdered in his home, with all indications pointing to a vampire assault. The victim's friend, Baron Otto, and the physician who analyzed the body are certain that the vampire is the mysterious Count Mora, or perhaps his daughter, but receive little help from the law. Professor Zelen, an expert in the occult, is called in to assist with the investigation. This film is a reuniting of sorts with Bela Lugosi and Todd Browning, who, of course, were behind Dracula together as director and lead actor, respectively. This also has some other great cast members from the time. Lionel Barrymore is in it. Lionel Atwill is in it. I love Lionel Atwill and pretty much everything he's in. And the fact that I have gone through the catalog of Lugosi and Karloff and these old school dudes the way that I have, and seen some pretty stupid and terrible things, I don't know how I haven't watched a well-known and good film from Lugosi. I mean, it's another one that's well regarded as a good film. So why it has escaped me for all these years, I do not know. And a film in similar vein, also featuring Lugosi, ironically, not as a lead, so that's why I sort of let this one cheat a little bit. It is repeating an actor, but he is not the lead. But another film from that golden era that I haven't seen, this golden era of horror. I've seen a lot of them. I've seen a lot of golden age horror things, but I still haven't seen Island of Lost Souls. And I need to see it. That was another contender for tonight. Another one I own on VHS. 71 minutes. Sounds like a masterpiece. Terror stalked the brush-choked island where men who were animals sought the girl who was all human. An obsessed scientist conducts profane experiments in evolution, eventually establishing himself as a self-styled demigod to a race of mutated, half-human abominations. Stars Charles Laughton in the title role here. Lugosi, as I said, he's in a minor role, but basically he's the leader of some of these abominations, quote unquote, these half-human, half-mutated people. Island of Lost Souls is an adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is a story that I am familiar with, so I am familiar with the story of Island of Lost Souls, which is maybe why I haven't seen the film yet, because I am aware of the story, so I haven't really felt a need to watch it. But when you're looking at the people on my Letterboxd, all 5 stars, except for Joel, for some reason. Everyone else, 5 stars for Island of Lost Souls. So very, very acclaimed by the people I know and trust about this film. I don't know what's going on with Joel. Wanted to bump it up to modern day a little bit. And you have to go to an island by boat, by plane. You can't get to an island necessarily by train. Guys, for some reason, I don't know why, I still haven't seen Train to Busan. How have I not seen Train to Busan? This, of course, is from 2016, so one of the most recent films on this list. I actually think this is the most recent film on this list. But another film, 5s across the board, if not 5, 4.5, 3.5, all high scores. Everyone loves this film. I think the thing that's always held me back with this film is I always, because my wife suggests that we watch this all the time, and I always turn her down because it's always too late at night when she wants to watch this film. 118 minutes, it's in a foreign language. It's just kind of hard for me to pop that on in the middle of the night. If anyone were to say, like, hey, let's watch Train to Busan, and it's 4 p.m. or 6 p.m., I'll be like, all right, bet. If we want to start it at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, I'm like, can we watch? Is there something else we can watch? But Train to Busan, life or death, survival begins. When a zombie virus pushes Korea into a state of emergency, those trapped on an express train to Busan must fight for their own survival. I particularly love films, horror films too, but just films in general that can take place in a claustrophobic, maybe just a centralized location. I love trains, obsessed with trains. I'm going on a train ride in a couple weeks. Um, I love Mugen Train, the Demon Slayer film. I love films that you can kind of just feel like you're trapped on there with the characters in these environments. That's why I like The Last Voyage of the Demeter so much. You just feel like you're on that boat. Um, so this film I need to watch. Like this, before the end of this year, hopefully, I'm going to be watching Train to Busan. I've put it off long enough. I can't continue to do it. It's been torturing me that I haven't seen Train to Busan. And people were tortured in a film that also I've avoided somehow. Hostel. How have I not seen Hostel? I was dumbfounded that I haven't seen Hostel. Like, I was kind of like scrolling through Letterboxd looking at shit I haven't seen. And I haven't seen it. For some reason, like, I always forget this film exists. It started going on at the same time as, like, the Saw films were up. The torture porn, quote-unquote, genre was in full effect. So, Hostel was a film that I just kind of missed the mark on. It missed the boat for me. Obviously, it had some sequels and stuff like that. I've never seen any of them. I've never seen any film in the Hostel franchise. But we'll focus on the first one for the purposes of this list. Directed by Eli Roth from 2005. I have very mixed feelings about Eli Roth as a filmmaker and as an actor, that rather. There's some stuff that he's done that I've liked, but not everything. So I don't even know if I can necessarily call myself a fan of Eli Roth. But I like some of his stuff. Like, some of his stuff I like, not everything. He's been on a couple podcasts that I've listened to, so I like him on those podcasts. Like, he seems like a cool dude. He's really into Italian horror. He's a really interesting person to listen to. But I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of all of his work. So I don't even know if I'll like Hostel when I finally do go around and watch it someday. Welcome to your worst nightmare. 3 backpackers head to a Slovakian city. Wow, I apologize for that one. That promise to meet their hedonistic expectations, with no idea of the hell that awaits them. This one, like I said, and all these other ones, people give a lot of good scores to a lot of films. I also know that a lot of people do not like the Hostel films. So when you look at this on my Letterboxd, there's lots of 1 stars, 2 stars, stuff like that. So I know that it's not necessarily the greatest film. So that's also another reason why I've sort of been putting it off for so long. But it is a film that I feel like, as a horror fan, eventually I'm going to need to check it off the box. I'm going to need to check out Hostel one way or another, one day or another. So, I don't know, like, there's something so interesting about kind of like looking at what you've watched, because like there's some films that I've seen a billion times. There's some films that I've never seen. Like, it's just like, it's hard for me to rewatch a film unless I like really love it. But there's so many films that I've rewatched, and there's so many films that like are just waiting for me to love them, but I haven't seen them yet. And as we are closing out part of this podcast, there's still 2 films to do, and it's starting to get real dark outside. It's actually kind of almost pitch black outside at this point. But when we started recording this podcast, it was only near dark. It was only a little bit dark outside when I started doing this. So Near Dark is another film that, like with all these, obviously, because I've been saying it 100 times, never seen it. The poster is absolutely iconic. Every time I see the poster for this film, for some reason I also think it's a poster for American Werewolf in London, because for some reason I think that image is very similar to when the dude gets fucked up by the werewolf at the beginning of Werewolf of London and he comes back as a ghost. But Near Dark, not a werewolf film, but a vampire film. Directed by Catherine Bigelow in the wonderful year of 1987, several years before my birth. In one hot, hungry kiss, he gave her everlasting love. She gave him everlasting life. Our farm boy reluctantly becomes a member of the undead when a girl he meets turns out to be part of a band of vampires who roam the highways in stolen cars. This is famously one of Jared's films that he really likes a lot. He gave this 3.5. Miles gave it 3.5 as well. Again, tons of 4s, tons of 5s. And me being as big of a vampire fan as I am, it's kind of hard to really put into thoughts why I haven't seen Near Dark yet. I know for a while it was a little bit hard to get on physical media, and now it's on streaming. Like, now I'm able to find it on streaming, especially in October. All of these streaming services are putting out, like, their Halloween collections. I've definitely seen Near Dark on Peacock and stuff like that. And the last film I want to talk about is a film that's been on my Peacock watch list specifically, because this came on Peacock, like, day one, I want to say. And I put it in my watch list immediately. Haven't watched it. Again, by a horror filmmaker who I love quite a bit. It's also named after a bar in Cleveland that I like quite a bit. This is Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. And I think that it kind of suffers from having a little bit of a generic name-ish. Because how many films from the 80s are called something similar to this, like The Funhouse? It just kind of like blends in with everything else. This is from 81. And it's something that I want to see. Like, this one's on my watch list again for this year. Like, this is another one that I really want to see coming up very soon. Pay to get in, pray to get out. Rebellious teen Amy defies her parents by going to a trashy carnival that has pulled into town. In tow are her boyfriend Buzz and their friends Liz and Richie. Thinking it would be fun to spend the night in a campy funhouse horror ride, the teens witness a murder by a deformed worker wearing a mask. Locked in, Amy and her friends must evade the murderous carnival workers and escape before it leaves town the next day. This is another one that everyone's been telling me to watch. There's so many people that have told me to watch The Funhouse, because it's another one, just like with Last House on the Left, that I'm notorious for haven't seen it yet. Tobe Hooper, of course, an icon in his own right. Poltergeist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, stuff like that. He also, excuse me, he also did Eaten Alive, which is another film Miles is obsessed with, and he tells me I need to watch it all the time. But I think we're watching Eaten Alive next time Miles comes over, so that one I didn't include in this list, because probably by the time this video comes out, I will have seen Eaten Alive. I would love to watch The Funhouse at Funhouse. I wonder if I can arrange a screening of the film at the establishment. That would be quite the treat. But I think it's a good concept for a film. Just for whatever reason, haven't watched it. Thinks it has a little bit of a generic title for what it is. And those are 10 horror films that I haven't seen. Most of them I want to. I could have called this 10 horror films that I want to see, because in some capacity, I do want to see all of these films one way or another. Whether for better or for worse, or just to check it off the list. These are 10 films that I haven't seen, but I want to. And I want to know your thoughts. If you guys have seen any of these films, where should I start? Which ones of these should I check out? Let me know what your favorite scenes are from these films, your favorite segments. Maybe if these films were done by a director that you like, or have an actor in it that you like. What are some other stuff that they've done that I should check out? I'm all about expanding my horizons on Buddy's House of Horror. I mean, I can only rewatch some of these films that I love so many times. Like, I can only rewatch Nightmare on Elm Street so many fucking times. Like, you gotta expand your horizons. And I watch a lot of obscure shit, but these are vaguely mainstream-ish films that I have not seen. So they are checking off boxes for me. I do want to watch all of these. Hopefully, if not by the end of this year, hopefully I can get into some of them next year. But I want to know more. What are some horror films that you think I should check out that maybe I haven't checked out so far? Follow me on Letterboxd and look at what I've watched. I rate pretty much everything that I watch. Give me some spooky horror movie suggestions of things that I need to be watching this Halloween, next Halloween, and for many, many Halloweens to come. And when I do watch them, if it's something you'd want to see an episode on, definitely reach out. And we'll see if I can do an episode about it. I mean, we'll see if I have enough material on that film to do an episode about it. But with that, my food is only a few minutes away, so we are going to wrap up this podcast right off into the sunset, and I'm going to enjoy a delectable dinner. I love sweet, tasty treats. I love warm, home-cooked meals. Even though this wasn't cooked in my home, I can know it was made with love elsewhere, and I cannot wait to dig in and eat it. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you guys for listening, watching, subscribing, commenting, all of those wonderful things. And I will see you in the outro. But that's about it for this time, you guys. I hope you enjoyed 10 horror films that I have not seen, but I want to. If you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribing to the show wherever you listen to the show, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to the show. Leave me a 5-star rating and a review, and help spread the good word of Buddy's House of Horror. Tell all your friends, family members about the premier podcast on the internet dealing with horror films. I'll see you guys back here for another episode of the show coming out very, very soon. So with that, you guys, take care and stay spooky.